There's something about the design of this phone that I find very interesting, but a bit weird. The Nokia N95 had some of the best features for a smartphone. It's got fast 3G internet speeds, a beautiful 5 megapixel camera, and revolutionary GPS-based location mapping, to name but a few. It was well ahead of its time. 90% of all phones at the time had a numeric keypad. This phone was designed around the basic numeric keypad. It was so common that people saw this as natural and normal for a phone. Smartphones at the time were mostly a niche product. Most people didn't feel the need for full smartphone features. The majority of buyers just wanted calls and text. They were not looking for an alphanumeric keyboard or a stylus-based touchscreen. But the N95 was different. It had everything we expect from a smartphone. Nokia had designed the N95 around that very familiar at the time numeric keypad. And with that stroke of clever design, Nokia had made the first complete smartphone that everyone wanted to buy. This became the highest selling phone of 2007, 10 million units sold in the first year. It was far outselling the first iPhone that had released only 3 months after the N95. The N95 was a huge success. This was peak Nokia. But with this highly successful numeric keypad-centric design, are there any indications of how Nokia's executives managed to run the company into the ground only 3 years later? I want to expand on why this was the case, but first, let's have a look at the fabulous N95 and see what this phone can do. The N95 has a very satisfying slide-up mechanism to reveal its numeric keypad. Slide phones had been common for many years, but there's something unique about this slide. It can also slide down to reveal media playback controls. And doing this switches the entire user interface to landscape mode, giving the phone a very unique look. I enjoyed using this feature more than I thought I would, and it really makes the phone look very cool. The N95 also has the not very well known at the time TV out feature, where you can plug a TV directly into the headphone socket. This TV out function was actually built directly into the OMAP ARM CPUs that were being used in quite a number of phones at the time. This ability was more common in the 2000s than most people realized. But when mobile CPUs were overtaken by Qualcomm Snapdragon, this feature disappeared from mobile phones just as quietly as it had arrived. My N95 is carrier branded with the Telstra network. This kind of ruins the pure N95 experience. They take over one of the soft key functions, and they also put the Telstra app as the default app when you bring up the menu, which is kind of annoying. This often happened at the time because the main customer buying phones were the networks, who were not very focused on the end user experience. In MrMobile's N95 video, he mentioned that AT&T in the US wanted Wi-Fi disabled on the N95 to force their customers to pay for 3G data. To Nokia's credit, they refused this appalling demand. I'm not very familiar with this period in the Symbian operating system. I want to explore some of its functions and some of the apps that were available. One important note when running apps is there are several versions of the N95, including the slightly bigger 8GB model in black. But the important difference between the models is the available RAM. I have one of those original versions here, and 64 megabytes isn't a lot of room for running some of the bigger Symbian apps. Later versions of the N95 had 128 megabytes. The version I'll be looking at in this video is the N95-3, which should have 128 megabytes of RAM. The main smartphone features are pretty good, with 3G internet giving a decent speed, though the browser is very out of date. The GPS mapping is really nice, though it tends not to get a location indoors, and the online maps are no longer available. And the camera quality is good. Still photos are really nice, and video quality isn't too bad. The Nokia N95 runs Symbian 9.2, S60 3rd edition, Feature Pack 1, version 3.1. That's quite a mouthful. Symbian had become the biggest mobile operating system in the 2000s, but in that process, it had become so fragmented into different versions of itself that apps developed to run on one device were not always guaranteed to run on other models, making finding apps to run and test on my N95 quite a challenge. Also, this version of Symbian is the first to enforce certificate signing when installing apps. This means all apps and games made for previous versions of Symbian are no longer compatible with the N95. At the time, these restrictions also made it very difficult for the large community of hobbyists to develop free apps for Symbian. By early 2008, this situation had become so bad that many end users were getting developer certificates just so they could load software onto their phones. So many people started doing this that it overwhelmed the Symbian certificate issuing system to the point where they had to shut the system down for a few weeks. Another option was a third-party website in China called OPDA. If you gave them your IMEI number, you could then sign apps to run on your own phone. But even this service eventually stopped offering free certificates due to the high demand. This chaos led to work being done in the underground into hacking the operating system to bypass Symbian's restrictions. And today, with no methods left for online signing, the only way to install apps is hacking Symbian. The method I'm using to hack my N95 is to run a patched version of Norton Security. This software by design has full read-write access to the system files that are normally inaccessible by other apps. I did have to change the phone's date a couple of times to find a year that would allow the software to install. I also found I had to put an old SIM card in the phone to get the installation to work. The SIM doesn't need to be connected, just installed in the phone. This Norton software has been patched by hackers to overwrite some system files with some patched versions. These patches can then bypass some of Symbian's security restrictions. It's ironic that software originally designed to protect the phone is now being used to hack the phone. The other software I'm installing is called ROM Patcher, and this installs some patches such as Install Server, and this will help bypass a lot of the certificate signing restrictions. The Nokia N95 is an important cultural artifact. Sometimes it's ludicrous the steps we have to go to use things we may have bought in the past, and this process makes me wish companies were more respectful of their own legacies. Nokia could have released their own patch for Symbian to bypass these online restrictions when they took their servers down. A similar problem is happening today in the video games industry, with the YouTube channel Accursed Farms taking up the fight to companies who are killing games. It's time we push back on our culture being destroyed like this. But I'm pleased that the N95 at least has this solution for installing software today. And now we can finally start installing some software on this phone. The first game I was able to install is a port of Another World, an early 90s game, with a really nice atmospheric feel to it. I was also able to install a CPU monitor. This confirms the 128 megabytes of RAM in this model of the N95 and shows the ARM CPU running at 206 MHz. Though I understand this CPU can run up to 332 MHz. Not all the games that I was able to install are fully compatible. This Ball X game, for example, expects a phone with a higher resolution display. Another game, Snakes, is a Nokia-developed snake game. It does look cool. I found a version of Spore for Symbian. This game was a huge hit in 2008, though I'm finding the gameplay a bit average. Bounce Boing Voyage, another Nokia-developed game. This has really nice 3D graphics. This is the sort of game I'm looking for. "3D performance seems quite good on the N95. Another awesome game I found is Skyforce. This is a nice fast shooter and it's got auto fire. A much more interesting game is Lament Island, and apparently this is a Symbian exclusive, though the startup warning is quite concerning. It says, this application will make use of the following features: SMS messages, making a connection to the internet, recording sounds using your phone's microphone, recording images using your phone camera. And in the game itself, it's very atmospheric. I kind of like the spooky atmosphere and the creepy nature of the game, especially with that warning at the start. This might actually be one of my favourite games that I've played on this phone. And of course, there's a Port of Doom, which can be difficult to control at times, because the navigation keys are actually quite crowded. In fact, there are 13 buttons in total in the navigation button section. Even the numeric keypad below only has 12 buttons. There's the center press button with the 4-way directions around it. There's 2 menu buttons. One gets you to the standard icon pages, and the other gets you a more media-style rotating icons menu. There's 2 soft keys for the on-screen selections, and a call and call end button, and finally an edit and a clear button. This really is an insanely complex set of buttons. I think this points to why Nokia failed just a few years after releasing the N95. It was the result of Nokia's internal culture and their committee-thinking design process. This 2010 New York Times article is very revealing on this subject. A few years before Apple introduced the iPhone, research engineers prepared a prototype of an internet-ready touchscreen handset with large display. But management worried that the product could be a costly flop. Nokia did not pursue development. No individual user interface designer would think it was a good idea to make such a complex interface. While this management style did result in a smartphone designed around a numeric keypad, and that attracted a huge number of people that had never bought a smartphone before, this internal culture at Nokia also paralysed any innovation and change at the company. We can see that the supreme success of the N95 had made Nokia become overconfident to the point of arrogance. For the next couple of years, Nokia kept releasing keypad-based phones, as they were denying the reality of the changes happening all around them. The monster that had been created with the N95 took over the whole company. The story of Nokia failing makes me sad, but it's an important lesson to understand. I've enjoyed exploring the N95, a phone that I was keenly aware of at the time, as I was using my awesome, but by 2007, aging Sony Ericsson K750. The K750 also had a fun patching and hacking culture around it that I loved, and it kept it going. I'm pleased to see that the N95 also has patches. It looks like there's a good number of patches for customizing Symbian, though they work a bit differently to the way other firmwares are patched. They're selected in ROM patcher, and they seem to be inserted at runtime. This means doing a full factory reset should remove all patches from the system. One advantage that Symbian had over other phone operating systems at the time was the number of scene demos that was made for this system. I love scene demos, and I've wanted to see these Symbian ones for a very long time. I'm really pleased that I get to see them on the N95, because this is an amazing phone and a classic example of how a Nokia phone changed the world. But there are so many different models of Nokia, and Symbian has a long history, and I'm going to have to find other models of Nokia to try them on for future videos. Let me know which Nokia models you had, and if I missed something important in the video, let me know in the comments below. If you find yourself enjoying this channel, consider one day helping me out with a super thanks, membership or Patreon. You'll be helping to keep these videos freely available for everyone, and your support, while optional, is much appreciated. But that's it for the moment, and I'll see you next time.